Mike's, I think that he's.
Oh, is
Yeah,
it?
he is. He's not gonna make it.
That's right.
Yeah, he sent an email this morning.
Alright. We're unmuted now. Let's start this meeting of the Bi-State Working Group. We have 3 members present. Has anybody heard from Marla? Or,
No, I haven't heard from anybody else.
okay.
And
so we don't-
Michael's not.
let
don't
the
have a quorum.
show we currently do not have a quorum. For the next couple of minutes at least.
Don't
So
think we have any action, though, do we?
I don't think we have any actions.
we just gonna start talking about the issues. So we will skip the approval of the minutes and move on to the review of the actions.
All right, the only action we've been tracking is the biological opinion. I did get touch base with ODOT and FHWA. I got an email last week from Rod. They have submitted the biggest section of the biological opinion to NOAA, so they are moving through the sections. They were almost done with the second biggest section, and then they've got some smaller sections. I don't know the total number of sections that are. He did think it was reasonable that we would be done as of right now in September. So I think all that was at least positive that they were feeling like we could make September.
Yeah,
for getting the
23.
biological opinion. What's that?
Nothing.
I have no idea because we don't get to see it. I just,
I just asked what year.
oh, what year? Yeah, that's a good
Well,
question.
and is that being done with the NOAA side or them done submitting it to NOAA?
No, that would be done with NOAA and everything, having it completely done in September. So,
Does it seem like there's, I mean, I know there's procedures, and is there any indication that major revisions would be needed, or we're kind of working through a process that we're trusting?
we don't anticipate any major revisions. They went through the 2 biggest sections. We've answered the comments and questions that they've had through those sections. The rest of the sections, from what Cindy Callahan explained, was more describing the impact, like the I want to say animals is probably not the right term, but describing the events and describing is more the fluffy stuff than it was the details of actually the mitigations and things like that that are in the biological opinion. So those
This stuff,
sections,
you mean boilerplate, you don't mean like fluffy
the
animals.
boilerplate stuff, yes, not fluffy animal stuff.
Fluffy
But
No
the
panda
more
bears, we don't
the-
have any charismatic mega.
The more boilerplate kind of just, regular language that's required to be in there to fill it out. So it sounded like we would get a lot less questions from that. And those sections seem to be more, she said they were less complex. It was more straightforward,
Thank you.
so. To go along with that though, just real quick, the MOAs, the section 106 memorandum of agreement. Which is the other side of the NEPA documents in order to get to the ROD. We do have a delay in that, and that is sitting with Yakima Nation. We are unclear right now why we're not getting any type of response from them. We had a good meeting with them, probably almost 2 months ago now. Since that meeting, we have not heard anything. They have not responded to us. Kevin tried last
I
week.
did get an email from Marcus this morning.
Oh, you did? Okay, because
Yeah.
last update you had heard anything.
This
so-
was this morning.
Okay,
So
Did he-
we're just trying to get some time. He just asked if I had any time to talk to him. so-
okay. Well, that's the first contact we've had since for 2 months.
Okay.
So they didn't respond, FHWA, ODOT, us. So hopefully that means that whatever, I don't know if they were working on something and they just were busy or what, but maybe that's a good sign that they're through whatever that was and we'll be able to move forward. So,
I'll let you know what day and time and.
Okay.
I'll see if.
yeah, no, we should have everybody that he'll allow us to have in there and try to have it about the MOA if we can.
Okay,
Because we need to get that moving because there's 2 pieces with Yakima. They're the only ones that had comments on the section 106, as well as then moving through with their treaty tribe. And we need to move those things forward. They can go independently, but we've got to get conversations about them independently
okay,
moving.
I'll
So,
keep you posted.
yeah, so that'll be a major deal to get them moving. So
Could you remind me, what was the nature of their section 106 comments?
I don't remember off the top of my
There
head.
wasn't
It's
anything.
it's
Oh,
their
I think it's-
TCP.
yeah.
It's about their, and I always forget what it
Well,
cultural.
it's the treaty cultural property or something like that, but The issue is that it's not a finite spot or thing. It's more of a spiritual sense, and so they're trying to figure out how do you mitigate for the impacts to that.
And there's a little difference in opinion between them and DAP on exactly how to define
Yeah.
that. The Department of Historic Preservation on the Washington side. So that we really just need those two to talk and come to an agreement. It's not really even our stuff that we have to do on that. It's more getting those two to agree to how they're gonna document it in the 106.
Right.
So that would be key to us getting that done. Do you want to step back and do the minutes since
Yeah,
Catherine keeps
that's what I was gonna do, and it's traditional cultural properties.
Thank you.
additional call? Yes, that's it.
Okay, since we have Mayor Catherine Hewitt here, let's move back. And has everybody had a chance to review the minutes?
Yep.
All
Yep.
right,
Oh, we also have Christie.
We perhaps have Christie
Oh.
Chapman, I'm not sure.
Chapman, yeah. Christie is jumping. Christie, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you.
Did you have a chance to review the minutes?
I did. I'm fine.
Okay, with that, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Second,
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
I,
I,
Bye.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right.
All right, the Hood River White Salmon Bridge Authority, one step I wanted to do was any updates from the county on either county on their nomination process, appointment process.
I can give a quick update. We had, as of last week, we had 2 people who had applied via the website. I spoke to both of them, and then I put an application in this morning as a formality for the county, and I believe that Grant was putting one in. Is he the nominee of the city, or is?
I wasn't sure how much staff had followed through. At our council, we affirmed that Grant is our nominee,
Okay,
or I'm not sure if that's not the right word. We recommend him for you to consider to nominate.
great.
And
He
then it was-
contacted me today and asked if he should fill out the form. I suggested he should, since there were 3 lines to it: name, address, phone number. So so he did that.
And then council also suggested put my name forward as the alternate, if there are
Okay.
alternates that you choose.
Well, great. I did not hear about that.
So should I fill out the thing?
I figured it makes sense for everybody to fill it out. I figured I wasn't special, so I filled it out. It literally will take you
Good.
15,
But
20 seconds.
let's be clear, the recommendation from council
Yes.
was that you consider Grant as
I
the,
appreciate
as the
that.
commissioner.
Great.
But if there was an alternate that they suggested, I could be the alternate.
So is
Great.
the city going to send a letter with that recommendation so that they have?
That's what I assume, and I kind of wonder if Jeff has that from Abigail or.
It could easily have it. I spoke with Heidi and she didn't mention that, but we were more trying to debug. There's some errors in the system. so
I'll
we're trying to
mention it
debug
to
that.
Abigail. Thank you.
And for Clickitat County, we still have some time for the cities to get that information to us, and then we'll set up interviews. But last I have heard, we haven't had any applications that have actually been filled out. I have heard some interest though. So,
One thing on that, Jake, I did hear at the open house that it sounds like someone, I believe his name is Dave Gibson from Mount Adams Fruit, is probably going to be signing up, which would be great.
yep, we've heard that as well, and I don't know if he's talked to Mayor Hewitt from Bingen, because that's what I think Mount Adams Fruit's within the city limits.
Yeah, it's Doug Gibson, and I have not talked to him yet. I did want to get some clarification from the county in terms of like representation, because his business is located in Bingen. I think he has a home in White Salmon, and he also has a home in Yakima where they have like a bunch of orchards. And he splits his time kind of equally there. And so I wasn't sure. I think technically his residence, like where he's like registered to vote, is in Yakima. And so I wasn't sure about, it just makes it complicated, right? So I don't know if that means that he's eligible or not.
But that we had no residency requirement, because we talked about having,
Right.
you could have an expert from the East Coast you'd want to bring in at a
Right.
certain point.
Yeah, so we, as far as we have for our committees, we don't have a residency requirement. He does own property in the county. So as I understood it, it was that because it's in Bingen was thinking about, he was thinking about going through that process. So the Bingen City Council would then affirm him as their recommendation. With,
Okay.
then we also need an alternate too. It would be great to have that. And so
Okay.
your council can get together by that date and put forward the names, then we can go from there.
Okay,
But if you need his contact information so you can talk to him, I think I can get it to you.
what date do we have to have everything submitted to you by?
Let me double
I think they're
check.
making appointments the 20th.
We're making appointments the 20th. We asked, I think that we get them submitted to us by the 13th.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And if I could just clarify here, there was the issue where at some place the documentation got messed up. So instead of up to 3 alternates, this is up to 2 alternates. I think you tracked that down, Kevin, right?
The
Mike.
CFA, the CFA says 3
Okay,
and, but the draft nomination language had said 2.
okay.
So I didn't see the final versions of the nominations. So,
The guidance.
the guidance,
Right.
yeah, but it is allowed up to 3,
And
but you
how
can
are
do
you
as
guys
as little as 1.
thinking of doing it? I mean, all 3 of them represent the county in essence. And so the question is, does a alternate represent an individual seat, kind of like Christie can only represent Mike, or is it any alternate who shows up? But then how do you pick which one gets to vote?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that this morning. I don't have an answer on that yet. First I wanted to make sure that we could appoint up to 3 alternates. Then I figured if we appoint 3 alternates, then that question makes sense. If we're appointing less than 3, then it's simply you've got a pool of
Alternate
people
one,
to
alternate two.
plug in as well as you can. So did you have any thoughts on that? It doesn't really matter.
I think because they're representing the entire, the county's appointing them, I think the best thing to do is have alternate 1, alternate 2, alternate 3. So that if the 2 people show up, at least everybody knows who's the first one that's gonna vote. That's an alternate.
The CFA speaks to that a little bit. You might go back and just review what it said. I thought it was 1 alternate per director. I'm not sure it is limiting or allows what you're saying.
No, it
So just-
specifically says that an alternate can fill in for more than one
One
director,
director,
but
that's
only have
correct.
1 vote.
That's correct. So I don't know if that means that you could have unassigned alternates.
That's the way I read that.
Okay,
So
Okay.
then what the county would do is you would assign alternate position number 1, so that if they show up, they're the first one to get to vote.
okay,
So the person in number 3 knows I'm the backup to the backup.
okay,
Right.
okay.
And the way I've been explaining this to people as I've been meeting with them is that these commissions don't tend to there don't tend to be a lot of votes, and when there are, they're not controversial votes. That more the issue is we're trying to bring in lots of people with different experiences, and so whether you're a first line commissioner or whether you're an alternate, we still hope that you'll be coming to all the meetings. We still hope you're going to be speaking and participating and involved in it, because that's how we get different kinds of knowledge on the board.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, most of it will be more approval. Big stages in the project process of
Right.
approving Route A or Route B.
right, and I suspect we will be unanimous by the time we vote on those.
Yeah.
Yep. But it will take us some time to get to that unit, to get to that unanimity.
Yes.
Okay, moving on.
Okay, the other is the IGA with the port. Kevin, I don't know if you want to update everybody kind of where that
Yeah.
is.
So Bill Oley, who's the port's outside counsel, and he's provided services to the project. He's done a first review of that, and so our attorney, Kristen Campbell, is looking at that. I didn't know if the working group wanted to see it, or if that was something that you wanted to go to the Bridge Authority. Or does it, or both? I was gonna try to get it to you quicker, but then there was the whole discussion about the attorney and holding that off, so I didn't know if you wanted to hold off reviewing that until you had your attorney on.
I think it's a very relevant question. There's, and as I keep pondering this. It's tempting to assume that this group, the bi-state working group, will be of one mind with the bridge authority, but there's no guarantee of that at all. They might want to go a completely different direction once they exist. I mean, we're not like
Right.
crazy or evil, but there's no guarantee that they're gonna agree with anything that gets decided. So I'm tempted to wait and allow them the authority to make their decisions, but we also don't want to be behind. So those are my.
I mean, it's an intergovernmental agreement with the bridge authority, but yet the nominations are done by the county. Would it make sense to send it through the county prosecuting attorney's offices or your legal counsel to take a look at it to see if there's any issues with the county?
Yeah, I can't imagine what the issue, what issues that, what an issue might look like, but.
What-
uh,
Would there be any wisdom, and this is, I'm just talking. Would we, the bi-state group, want to engage an attorney for a 90-day, so that they would be on the ground when the bridge authority exists? And then they could choose their own attorney, but at least they'd have somebody out the gate so that they could begin making important decisions.
I thought that we had kind of talked about that in the last meeting. I felt like we couldn't identify anything that couldn't wait for this group to get together and have the bonding process
Mhm.
and the self-determination process of choosing their own attorney,
Uh-huh.
making their own decisions for themselves.
Good.
And we were trying, Marla also spoke a bit about the desire to see some air between the port and this bi-state working group and the new commission that we formed to have some separation. And that was a good way to make sure we have that separation.
So in the spirit of things, there's nothing that can't wait. What regards this IGA, what should we do?
I would say, feel free to send it to us because it's probably
Okay.
gonna, I want to take a look at it. It might take me a few nights to ponder it.
Yeah, no problem. I kind of took a little, once I heard there was a little bit delay, it became a little less of a important issue.
Yeah.
And so if you'd like, I can kind of ramp that back up.
Yeah, I'm always happy to offer an opinion also, but I think that it should be viewed that it's just us offering our opinion and,
Okay.
more eyes on it can't hurt, but we're not reviewing it for the authority. It is an intergovernmental agreement between the port and the authority,
So
right?
in fact, the authority will sign it.
Yes. Yeah, that's why I'm sort of scratching my head as to how the fact that the county appoints the commissioners, I can't imagine how that could create a nexus between the county and their involvement in that two-party IGA.
I see Jake's point in that we, the bi-state, have sort of less control over what the authority looks like because the commission is appointing. So in that way, the commissions are, in my view, more closely tied to the authority than the bi-state.
Right, but I don't think either is tied. The IGA is between two parties
Yes.
and these other groups are not part of it.
But in terms of steering or guidance or, yeah, right, no technical.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Jake, I think you and Commissioner Fox would be, what was it, ex officio?
We're stuck no matter what.
Yeah,
By legislation.
you're
As
not,
far
You're
as
not first to vote.
appointed.
Right.
as far as the attorney goes, someone explained it to me pretty well about, when you're setting up your own corporation, you bring an attorney in the beginning to set up the corporation. And then once the corporation's set up, then they make the decision of how they want to move forward. Would it make sense? I kind of agreeing with what Paul is saying is, does it make sense to retain someone for maybe just 90 days to just kind of help prop up this entity so that there's, that there's legal counsel that is their legal counsel, not the port's legal counsel, not the county's legal counsel, but theirs. And then they can make decisions moving forward on what they want to do.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Christie, this is something we discussed at the last meeting. And there was a strong desire to create a physical space, especially from the Washington side participants. And I think it kind of relates to the commentary that you saw in Mayor Hewitt's summary of the library meeting that happened in White Salmon. I think that there's a real value to this commission being clearly independent, clearly viewed as independent, and not as being steered by any of the other parties.
Oh yeah, totally understandable. And if it makes sense, maybe this attorney is appointed, this short-term attorney is appointed by Clickitat County, you know?
Yeah, so the question that we asked last week, or last meeting was, is there anything that has to be decided in the short term that means that we couldn't wait those 90 days until we have this group up and running and with its own attorney? And there was some small thing that you came up with and we all decided, yeah, we could live without that. So it
There's the
really,
IGA, that's better.
yeah, it really was not a problem to leave this gap. What you, Paul, are saying totally makes sense in the abstract. In this specific case, it's just, it didn't seem like it was necessary.
Okay, that's great. As long as you guys thought through it, and that's perfect. Thank you.
So speaking of that, the early activities for the new authority, one is legal services. One is getting the liability, I'll say liability, the insurance figured out. We are getting, and then public records training. We are getting suggestions for those together so that they at least have a starting point. And they won't be start completely cold. And then we're also putting kind of a book together of kind of base rules that they can look through and either adopt or at least have something hard copy to mark up. So we'll continue to have those ready whenever they get on board. So, and there will be a little bit of time between if the appointments happen on June 20th and the current scheduled first meeting of July 10th. There'll be almost a month in between there from the time they get, we know who they are to their first meeting that they have. So
This is probably a dumb question, but is it crystal clear that, for example, you will continue to be working for the authority?
our contract is with the port. So unless the port transitions that contract over to the authority, we will continue to work for the port.
Okay.
That is something that has to be decided.
So let me
between the
turn my
two
head.
groups.
Seems likely that the authority will want to engage a consultant.
Right, so
Well, but you have
the
to-
funding has to move and then, yeah.
So because of this, because a lot of it comes down to funding and the new authority is gonna have a lot of discussions about. Do they want to hire staff and how do they want to operate that and how high do they want that overhead to be?
Yes.
Versus using the port with all of their amazing staff
Yes.
to be able to manage that financial sponsor ability and to hold all the dollars and run everything through.
So it's a little slower, more slow moving than I was imagining, that you guys are gonna have to have that conversation first,
Yes.
then. Sure, great. I'm glad,
There's a lot of negotiation discussions.
You're
that
making
would
me
be
feel
nice to be
comfortable.
had now, but in reality, we need to create that separation and
Sure.
let the new baby take off and it'll swaddle around for a while and it doesn't matter because these guys are still working. So as they work that out, it's not gonna have, I don't see any hard dates that are gonna have any material impact on the project.
The biggest one that I could see would be maybe in the grants cycle this year. Right now, the grants will go in with the port on them as the applicant. At some point when the authority gets their office and all their numbers and all that set up, they could switch that out on the grant applications as long as it's before the award to be the recipient agency. If that didn't happen and we received, say, a $200 million grant from, MPDG and the port was the recipient, then part of the IGA or some point, there'd have to be a discussion about moving that money over or transferring it or reassigning it if it is allowed by the grant. That would be the one caveat. Some of our current grants are not allowed to be transferred. So that would be the only kind of risk is that, we get a $200 million grant that can't be transferred, then the port is gonna have that money and there would have to be something, which is not a huge deal. I mean, it still can't be used for anything but the new bridge, so it would
Yeah.
just be a matter of how the checks
If
get
you
written.
find us $200 million,
Yeah,
it will be a heavy
it's-
problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's more of a.
We
who
will
writes-
figure it
yeah,
out.
Who writes the check thing, then that's really an issue.
So question for Kevin and Christie. You think the port commissioners have sort of begun to think this through, that a grant that is just perhaps about to go to the port, whoops, no, it's going to the bridge authority, like that's a not insignificant decision and process, and do you think that's been thought through at all?
I would defer to Christie.
What do you think you and your colleagues have been thinking about on that, Christie? Do you have a sense?
Well, I would say that the commission is, priority number one is the bridge. And so if there's a grant that is intended for bridge replacement that is awarded to the port, I think the commission is all in agreement that it's going to be moved over to the new entity or facilitated through the port and back to the new entity. Because everyone's on the same page of bridge most important thing.
Great, thank you.
So I think as far as I could, as far as how staff is viewing this. The way that we're working right now with the bi-state working group, we are prepared to work the exact same way with the bridge authority. And so operationally, it's going to be minimal change, assuming that the IGA continues on between the bridge authority and the port.
Thank you.
Like I said, it's a marriage, because there are grants that you can't just, subjugate over. And then you also have to think that on top of all those grants and everything, many of these grants are reimbursement. The new bridge authority has $0 in the bank, right?
Yes.
So we need to have that relationship with the port, with the cash flow in order to continue operating. So I think it's gonna work out fine, and I think the new bridge authority will see exactly the most efficient and cheap way of doing it, probably follow that path.
No, I asked, I can't remember if it was Kevin or Michael about the starting cash position. And there was some explanation to me about that the Washington state money would flow into the new authority's bank account at a certain point.
I'd have to go back and look. I think the Washington is the one that's not allowed to be moved over.
You're talking about the grant?
The
I think
grant.
you're talking about the new money, or
The new money.
they're talking about the new.
The new
15
money.
Is it 15 million we're getting?
That I would say right now is unknown. Because we don't know what Washington is going to do with the money. Whether they're gonna do kind of like they did with the grant and run it through one of the counties. Or if they're gonna run it directly to the port or the new authority.
Okay.
We don't
Yeah,
know.
we don't have a signed agreement, right?
We don't
Or
have an
haven't even
agreement,
seen an
haven't even
agreement,
seen an
right? Yeah, we haven't even
agreement.
seen an
The
agreement.
only information I've got on it is the money is coming from. Sorry, drawing a blank,
You're talking about the fund?
the funds,
Move ahead.
the Move Ahead Washington funding.
Okay.
Yeah,
So am I misremembering? Someone described to me a process by which a couple of $1 million would wind up in the authority's bank account relatively quickly. And does that ring a bell at all?
no,
Okay,
Like pay the insurance bill, for example.
right, or to.
Yeah, I guess what I would say to that, I would just come back to my prior comment. The way that we're operating with the working group is exactly how we'll operate with the bridge authority, meaning that if the bridge authority makes a recommendation to the commission, pay this company for insurance coverage, Debbie's staff is going to do that.
I get that, and with insurance, I don't worry. With an attorney, I do worry, because an attorney paid for by somebody else always feels.
So there's some
Weird.
ways you can do that. So right now, Kevin's understanding it, like the bi-state working group is an advisory body, and so it goes to the port.
Right.
Now, the difference would be is if the bi-state bridge authority says, port, we want you to pay this bill, then you can actually just pay the bill. It
contractual.
doesn't have to go in front of the board. And so that would create that separation. They're just acting as the financial sponsor that we have with, if you've ever heard of SEEK or any of these other groups that work as like a 501(c)(3) for all the little baby nonprofits, and they're the financial sponsor.
Right,
It's probably the best way to think of it.
And so I'm hoping that when we work through these discussions with the new Bi-State Bridge Authority, that will all get inputted into the intergovernmental agreement, so that then it makes sense on how the dollars are flowed and tracked and everything. So that then you don't have to go from one meeting and then have the port
right.
agree to expend the dollars. It's more like a contract where you're working as a contract finance operator for it. And when they say spend the money, then Debbie can spend the money.
It's the request, Debbie, please pay this bill for our attorney who is negotiating a contract with your board. That's why I feel a little.
So the opinion, and I think I've shared this with
Yeah.
you, is
Yeah.
that the example that Bill Oley, our outside counsel, used is insurance claims.
Yeah.
Like you'll have a defendant that will be required to pay for the legal fees of the offended party.
Right.
And so it's not, that was the example he was using. It's not unusual for an individual to pay for not only their attorney, but also their opponent's
But
attorney.
that's that when the court orders it or in a settlement agreement.
Yeah.
Right.
So even if it's legal, and
I understand.
I understand that there may be some good examples of it being legal, it's still it's still something that leaves me uncomfortable, and I want to, I'm hoping that we can figure out a scenario by which some cash gets into the authorities' bank account relatively quickly, so that they are capable of hiring their own attorney and.
I agree with Arthur. It's working great as we're all getting along.
Yeah, right.
It's easy. It's easy when we're all getting along.
Yes, I think theoretically how it would work, I mean, early in July or at some point in July, Debbie's gonna go down and open up a bank account for the Bridge Authority. So whatever money, if this legal issue is the one that is of most concern, there'd be a transfer theoretically from a fund of the ports into the Bridge Authority. And then Debbie's staff would write the check out of the Bridge Authority account to the attorney. So it's however you, we're trying to make it as easy as possible, but you know,
You do great. No, I completely appreciate your.
I don't know if that was the easiest way to do it. That's,
I think this, but for this discussion, this is something we do in a small work group, more so than a big group. And also this is gonna be a discussion for the Bi-State Bridge Authority, and so I'd say we continue to move along through our.
Yeah, just if people can keep in the back of their minds, what is a way to get
I
some
think-
cash into this place
We
quickly?
were just talking, I think what you're thinking of, Arthur, is that there was a replacement account that the port has. Right, that has some money in it. I'm not gonna say dollars, because I have no idea what they are,
It's got grants in it. It's got the grant.
but
money
it
in
doesn't have any toll revenue.
We are moving, so the port is budgeting to pay for lobbying for next year, because you can't pay for that out of grants anyway, and so we have budgeted the lobbying in that fund. So there's, I forget how much we budgeted, but there
there's like 300.
is that money.
Okay.
That's budgeted for that.
Okay. So
I think
maybe
it
there's
would-
not, I thought there was a replacement account that,
Well, there's the,
There is, but it's, like I said, it's got the.
but it
it's got the
only has that
grants,
300,000.
And it does have a transfer in, but to cover the lobbying.
well, there's also the bridge.
There's a
The
repair.
Hood River White Salmon Bridge Authority Replacement Fund.
Yes, which is the new one.
Which, yes, and it will be funded by the new pool.
Yeah, that one's entirely to handle the new toll.
Yeah.
Right,
It has, all the money that comes in there will be the increase, and then it will immediately be transferred into the Bridge Authority bank account.
Now theoretically, I guess the Bridge Authority could direct finance staff to cut a check out of that fund for its.
Well,
legal fee.
we would just pay, at that point, we'd just pay it out of the Bridge Authority. So starting in
Yes.
September, you'll have toll revenue, the Bridge Authority will have.
but
toll
previous to
revenue.
that, we'd have to, yeah.
We'll get.
So,
through-
question.
I just want people to be thinking along these lines because, yeah, as Mayor Blackburn says, as soon as there's some conflict, you don't want to be putting the port staff in the position of, gee, we were just asked to write a check for a lawsuit against us. Right, stuff like that.
So I have two questions. Number one, couldn't we, as the bi-state working group, agree to borrow money from the port for a short amount of time to cover this July to September gap? And then once the tolls start coming in September, then that could be paid back to the port. And would that clean things up?
Yeah, I was thinking, the authority could make that request. You could make a request to the counties, could make a request to the port, basically for a short-term loan. Yeah.
The CFA actually speaks to that too, that any of the entities that make up the CFA could choose.
I suspect, I think you're right. We'll have plenty of
few
solutions.
issues with the wording of some of this is that saying that we will have toll revenue, as we have sold this to the public, as we're going through the public, that all of this dollars is getting put aside as a reserve in order to become for a TIFIA loan. If we're gonna say we're gonna start using that money for other purposes, we need to change our speech very quickly.
And
Oh, that's a really good point.
And I just use that example more hypothetically than in practical use because of what we had been saying.
And then you also have to think about the lobbying. And so I think Kevin's thought this through very well, that, we're going to have a very close relationship with the port, being that financial fiduciary sponsor, because we're going to have to, because all the lobbying and everything has to come through them anyways. And so when you start looking at that, piecing it together, we could hire our own staff and do all this extra stuff, but either way, we're still going to be married. So, but again, let's move on and continue this problem for the new people that are on this new commission.
Can I ask one question before we move on? And I apologize that I haven't been able to attend the last few meetings, but one of the things that I wanted to check on is, because you guys have put so many hours into this thought process, how long is the bi-state working group, you guys, going to be in effect alongside with the new bridge authority to help set them up for success?
So the bi-state working group is a working group underneath you guys, Christy. The only thing in the CFA is that the two vice chairs will become ex officio members, and they would give that, oh, here's the past, here's the oversight, if there's nobody on that board that's ever been on the board before. I think it's been stated multiple times that one of the goals with the new board is to have continuity, so that there isn't a brain drain and a loss of information. And so I don't see it being an issue, to be honest with you, Christy.
Yeah, CFA actually says that the bi-state working group will no longer exist at the creation of the new authority, but the two members that transfer over will be that continuity.
Okay, thank you.
So first Monday in July, you and me having a beer, Christie.
Excellent.
All right, ready?
Yeah, please.
So GR updates, Oregon, we just to catch everybody up on the 16th, we did do a testimony for House Bill 3622 to the Joint Transportation Commission. That was unanimously approved and moved to Ways and Means, whatever that might mean, depending on what Oregon does. But it was at least passed out of the Joint Transportation Commission and moved forward. We also did get a letter of support from Senator Bonham and Representative Helfrich for our trip to Washington, pledging their commitment to get us the $125 million for the project. So we do have those things, which are big steps from where we were last year in applying for grants and other things where we had nothing from Oregon. So the fact that they've actually had two bills and more specific letters committing to getting the funding, I think will help a lot in the grant application process.
Last week, Mike, you asked me to reach out to the legislators saying, hey, the mayor's in favor, which I did. Has that step of the bill coming out of committee, when did that occur?
It was right after the 16th. I think it was close to the end of that week. So at the end of May, it went out of committee and into.
So that was
Ways and
before
Means.
I chimed in with, my huge
Yeah.
influence, whatever.
And I think that
I
was
read about
probably
it in
actually,
the newspaper.
And not to put too fine a point on this, but thank you, Senator Bonham, for supporting our bill. But the Senate is not functioning, but I guess it seems like this is the best we can do at this point.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
So federal, the appropriations, just recap on that. 5 of the 6 sent our appropriations through. We thought we were gonna submit it, well, we did attempt to submit it for 8 million, thinking that we could get Washington and Oregon to separately do 4 million each. It sounds like in our discussions at Washington that they're all gonna talk, and we're probably looking at only getting 4 million between all of them. But we will see whenever that all gets figured out, and that, I guess now that they've raised the debt ceiling, it's more likely that we will get that money. If they had not done that, then we're probably not going to get anything. We'll see how that comes out, but we'll continue to monitor and Hal's monitoring that. We did our trip from May 22nd to May 24th. We met with all of our representatives, or at least staff from their offices. All of them spoke really highly of the project. We were on their mind. They actually brought the project up. In one conversation, they actually said that they were talking about our bridge at the same time they were talking about the Brent Spence and the Gothel Bridge. Brent Spence is the big one between Kentucky and Ohio, and Gothel's is the one between New York and New Jersey. So to be in that company of projects and be on somebody's mind, I think is very good that the project is being talked about at the federal level and people are very aware of the project. I know, Jake, if you have anything else that you wanted to share on the trip?
I know when we went into that trip, we were kind of like, are we even gonna go? Is this gonna be worth it? The meetings with the senators and the legislators, I think, was really important with regards to the CDS asks. And we got some good information that came out of it. But the meeting on Wednesday with Federal Highways, that was everything we needed to hear. And asking some really good pointed questions and getting the responses that are gonna make our application even better. So
Good work.
it was a productive trip.
It was, yeah. So we met with Build America Bureau and with USDOT, had very good conversations with both of them on both TIFIA and getting that process going and how to do that, as well as the grant applications and how to make our grant applications better. One of the key things that was a little bit new information was the fact that they made multi-year fund grants. And they asked us if we were willing to do that, which our project kind of fits that. To make sure that our grant applications were clear that we would be willing to take a multi-year funding. So we're revising some of our grant language to make sure that's in there this year. But I thought that was very positive in that they're looking at ways. It sounded more like they're looking at ways to fund us than telling us that we're not eligible, we're not going to get funding. So I thought very positive conversations with them.
Right.
One other thing on the GR is that all 3 of the lobbyist firms' contracts are due. So we sent those around. Commissioner Anderson, Commissioner Fox both took a look at that and made a recommendation to move forward with their renewals. One of them was no increase, one of them was a 6% decrease, and one of them was a 6% increase. So we've made that recommendation and the board will take that up tomorrow.
Yep.
For approving those contracts. So
And this is JLA and Thorn Run.
it's Thorn Run, Boswell. So Thorn Run does Oregon. Boswell Consulting does Washington, and Summit Strategies does DC.
Great, thank you.
And if there's consensus from the working group, that'll end up on the consent calendar tomorrow night.
Are there any issues? Mayor Hewitt or Christie?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Can you repeat it?
The putting it on the consent agenda for the port to authorize the next year for the consulting firms. Just
I don't
wanna-
have a problem with that.
Sure, everyone's in favor.
I think it's fine.
The timing doesn't allow us to wait until the authority is in place. so-
Exactly.
I guess the only thing I can think of is well, this magical 3 months, we keep talking about, like, would it make sense to have a shorter duration commitment, given giving the authority, the bridge authority, the opportunity to make their own decision? I could see the benefit of that, but I can see the downside as well.
I think at this point, we've invested so much with these three entities. It's almost, in my opinion, I feel like it's a gift to give them this 1-year opportunity to see if they like them or not. And I would say, while I understand what you're saying, Paul, to let them make their own decisions, you know, I think we really need their lobbying efforts to help us continue to move forward. And, you know, if they decide after a year that they don't really want to move forward, they could make that decision at that time. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that seems reasonable. I just wanted to, I'm glad we're thinking of this question.
I thought that we don't have the option of writing a 3-month contract, do we? I thought, didn't we ask this last time?
My apologies if I don't
Maybe I
didn't
misremembered.
track that.
All I know is when we look at our successes from Washington and DC. And that I would hate to have to train someone new to go in there to talk about this project in front of the people that we meet with and we get in front of every time. We would be remiss to ever try to think about changing right now.
Good. Thank you.
I would also say a 3-month contract. That's all work leading up to the following session, so you would have all the work and then.
No,
Yeah,
yeah.
the benefit, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Should we move on?
All right, funding, finance, tolling, big discussion really there is around the open houses. We had our first open house last Wednesday on the 31st, on the Washington side at the library. Around 150 people showed up. I thought the event went really well. Was really honestly very surprised. We were not thinking we would get 150 people. I think overall it was good information for the public. There was a lot of misunderstandings and misconceptions that I think people were able to explain. I think it was good to meet the Bi-State Working Group and the members of that, as well as the change in port staff to get out and meet the public and explain that there has been a change at the port. I think was a big benefit. So I don't know if others attended.
I thought,
Speak on the event.
personally, from my perspective, I thought the event went over amazingly well. There was enough of us in there that there was a lot of one-on-one conversations with questions and answers, and that goes a long ways. From all the open houses I've been to, where people have, you know, just these things along the side and you get one choice. That was by far the best one I've ever been to. And I've been to a lot of them with dams and everything else that are just pitiful. And, but with that, I would agree though, that there was a lot of thoughts and theories about what's going on in the community. And these people are also the community gossips in a lot of instances. And so being able to help them understand so that they can kind of hopefully change their spiel of what they're saying that's more factual, I think is going to go a long ways. And so Catherine, Mayor, Keithler, I were all there and we were all in different places talking to different people. We've got the one coming up in Oregon. Are you both going to be able to
I'm gonna be
attend?
there, absolutely, yeah.
And would you want the mayors and I to show up for that just to help as well?
I think, I don't think it's necessary. I certainly wouldn't object if you were willing to come, but people know who we are.
Right.
We specifically didn't show up on your side because we didn't want it to look like we were pulling the strings, right? We had talked about this and thought that might be inappropriate.
I think if we introduced,
I don't think that's the case the other way.
I think if we introduced, I think if folks knew who you were, they'd be excited to talk to you. So I think there would be, if you're willing,
That's good.
benefit to have the Washington folks at ours. But just so you said, one-on-one conversations, the more of those that can happen, the better. And I don't want to give you an assignment, but it would be valuable if you could be there.
Yeah, and just that sort of made me think of the fact that also having these folks here will help remind the Oregon folks that this is just not an Oregon toy, that this is a bi-state project. And that would certainly be good.
Okay.
I know that, Marla and I cannot come on Wednesday.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah.
I'll try to make it. I might not be able to stay for the whole time, but I'd really like to stop by and see how it's going.
Yeah.
Whether or not I put on the badge. I'll be something else.
Yeah, I thought Mayor Hewitt's summary was very helpful. And I want to talk just for a minute because it seemed like Kristen was surprised at some of the reactions. I was not. And so I wonder if we could just talk about that a little bit, of how other people responded to.
Oh, I
to
was
the
there. I was there and I was not surprised about their reactions. My curiosity was more so what was, in these one-on-one conversations, and after talking with Kevin, it sounds like, and Michael, it sounds like, all three of the Washingtonian side all kind of were in support of, let's look forward, let's, so my questions kind of got answered. But yeah, both Port Commissioner Heather Gehring and I were at that. So yeah, we got we got it too.
Okay, so but you were not surprised at the sharpness of the.
No, not surprised at the
Okay.
sharpness at all. I knew.
I
it was
misunderstood your
coming.
comment. Thanks. I'm glad we
Yes,
talked
no,
about it.
my curiosity was more because, there was a lot of comments really directed very pointedly at what the port needs to do. And, people said they want to sue the port, it was a lot of, and so I was just inquiring of what the Washingtonian representatives were saying. Again, Jacob always mentions that this is a marriage of how you guys helped to prop up the port, that we're not trying to be the bad guy in all of this, but we're actually trying to move forward and do good things. That was the point of my comment. But I knew it was coming.
Yeah, and I can quickly say, because I saw your email and I didn't have time to respond. But yes, I was repeating myself over and over again to those kinds of disappointments, was just that the group of people that are right now working on this are not the same people that were making those decisions, decades ago, that have sort of been fuel to the fire in terms of feeling like that there's been a discrepancy or a disservice to the Washington side, because we haven't been able to, vote or really have a say in how the port was being operated. So, I said that over and over again. And then when people really felt like that was just sort of, yeah, but it's still like, we're talking about raising tolls, and like that has an impact on me, and like, how do I voice my concerns? And at that point, I would just say that, the Port Commission meets, they have meetings, they have public comments, you can still share your opinion that way, and that there's a process for that. So that's the information that I was sharing. And I heard Marla saying the same things about, like this, we're moving forward. We've got a good group of people. We're working really well together. Now is not the time. Like, we need a new bridge, so we need to collaborate. Because if we don't get a new bridge, we all suffer.
Yeah, and for me, Chrissy, I was always trying to roll it into the future, but also looking at the past. Everybody's big concern was, well, the port's diverting this money. They've been doing it for a long time. And I said, I always ask the question. I said, I think I've seen you in Solstice before, haven't I? Yeah. I said, well, you do know that if the port wasn't diverting some of those funds, most of the port likely wouldn't have been developed. It'd be more like the port side on the White Salmon side. I said, and I'm pretty sure I've seen your kids at the park down there at the beach. Is that not true? And they're like, yeah. And I said, so you've actually been self-funding because some of those dollars are getting diverted to those things that you enjoy to do. And they're like, oh, well, I guess that has a good point, but I still don't like it.
Well, it's a lack of control. They didn't
Right,
say.
and I said, so you've been concerned about a lack of control, and what we're saying right now is that in less than a month, we're going to appoint 3 people from Washington, and this whole new bridge is going to have equal representation. So everything you're concerned about, we're solving. Oh.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
So, and you know, I think there were some questions that I didn't have answers to, which I was really happy. Like, how are they gonna remove the snow off this bridge that doesn't have holes in it?
That's kind of the point.
That's a mighty fine question.
Well, actually, I've talked to people about that, but that's kind of the point, that
It doesn't have holes, but the question is how do you get rid of the snow? You can't
Right.
just plow it to the side. You got
it's just like the way you get rid of snow on every other bridge in the country,
snow
built
built
after 1980 or so, yeah.
But I was like, that's something I've never thought about.
Isn't that why there's shoulders on this new bridge? So that people can push the snow to the side and then it can be processed properly?
With the bridge, you have to remove the snow.
Yeah, they just dump it over the side. don't
Yeah.
they?
No, you can't dump in the river.
Oh, you
Haul it
can't.
off.
Oh, they haul it.
Yeah.
No, you
They'll
have to
push it
remove it.
from in.
And you-
Yeah, and then haul it.
This
There's
is-
ways
this
to
is
heat the bridge, there's
Well,
chemicals.
good
talk
thing
about
I
this
said-
later.
good thing I said I don't know.
It used to get so bad where I lived in Michigan, it got so bad they had to literally haul it out of town.
Yeah.
So,
There's a lot of options on bridges that we can talk about.
yeah.
Okay, shall we move on?
Yes,
But
Can I just jump in for a quick second? I wanted to give an update and let folks know that we've already received over 500 comments through the online open house as well. And it's just been live since Wednesday. So we've got lots of comments coming through, and no surprise as of now, the folks that have participated are leading towards option 1. So.
So, what I've been seeing online is a flurry of activity concerning, this bridge is ugly.
Oh, yeah.
And, I plan to answer that in a couple of different ways, but I thought maybe a little bit of a discussion before our May Street School meeting might be helpful.
Please.
So, number one is that, this bridge is by no means a sure thing, as I've said many times. And to take a bridge where our number one requirement is that we have to design and build this bridge with as little money as possible, so tolls are as low as possible. And to say, we want a suspension bridge, which is going to cost 10 times the amount, just because it'll look cool, is sort of borderline insanity. Number two, we are in the scenic area, so we have a visual subordination requirement. Again, a flashy and attractive, not attractive, but a flashy and showy bridge is not something that would be allowed in the scenic area. Simply reminding people that number three for me is the attraction to the current bridge. I find astonishing because I have studied the current bridge for a long time, and I've studied. I've been to conferences on historic roads. I have a little bit of an understanding of historic preservation. The bridge that we have today was the absolute cheapest possible bridge that could have been built in its time. It is the most generic, the most basic, the, again, cheapest possible bridge that they could build. They went to their engineers, and I'm sure they didn't even have an architect involved. And I can go feature by feature and point out how little ornament there is, even when there's opportunity. I mean, even the fact that the columns themselves, rather than adjusting the height so that they make an arch, are done in a linear fashion. So it's up, 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 down, 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 down. Just so many things that make me shocked that people are saying, oh, but this is such a charming old bridge. It's an old bridge. That's what it is.
And there there is in the NEPA documents a requirement to do an aesthetics committee.
Yep.
So we will have an aesthetics committee, but it is going to be somewhat governed by the Columbia River Gorge National Scenic Area Management Plan. That kind of loosely defines some of the things that the bridge, but it is part of that is that it's unobtrusive.
Right.
Um,
Visually subordinate.
and yep, so yeah, we will have to meet those requirements.
So another thing, thanks for reminding me, because people are saying, well, the drawings I've seen of the bridge are, and all that they've seen are artist conceptions,
That's
which are
correct.
basically showing this is what it might look like to put a bridge in that spot. The reality is there is no design to the bridge. So we don't know what color the bridge is. We don't know what architectural features it will have. We don't know if it'll have, concrete steps. We don't know what the light poles will look like. We know none of that. And so people are reacting to something that was just a sketch to help people appreciate
But
that there might be a different
that's how
bridge there.
people, most people visualize something in the future and you've now set an expectation.
Right.
Which is great, because as long as you set the expectation really low,
It's-
they'll be
yeah.
happy with something that's, because what I explained is, I said, this is an artist rendering as basic as possible, it's done on a computer. But what I'm hearing you just tell me is that you don't want to pay more in tolls. If you don't want to pay more in tolls, that means we have to build a bridge that's the longest lasting possible bridge that has the lowest possible maintenance. And while it might not be as pretty as a suspension bridge, it's gonna have low maintenance, so your tolls are gonna be lower. And then oh.
So
okay.
you can magnify that just a little bit more and I love the way you think about this. The way I describe it to people is, say we have a $500 million bridge, of which 400 million is paid for by federal and state grants, and then 100 million by local tolls. Okay, now you want to add another 300 million onto the cost of it to make it prettier. Federal and local, federal and state grants aren't going to pay for that. So you've just quadrupled your tolls. You haven't increased them by a little. You have quadrupled your tolls by adding that 300 million to make it a prettier bridge.
Right.
So the economics of it are really quite stark. That any fancy features we're adding to the bridge, we're paying for in tolls.
Mayor Kiewit put a note up there on.
Okay,
Yeah, I agree with Mayor Hewitt of, let's keep the bridge as basic as possible and get some pretty art on it. And that's the thing that you'll focus on.
And there are some NEPA commitments to do some architect like historic renderings and panels and
Book they're gonna publish.
a book, and work with the historic societies to put some stuff in some of the museums. And actually, one of the folks at the Washington meeting was from one of the historic buildings, and they asked if they could get a piece of the old bridge or something to actually put in their historic museum or something. So things like that I think are possible and required actually in some ways from what we're supposed to be doing.
The new bridge is going to be attractive. I'm not worried about that. People are just imagining it's like a freeway on ramp. That's like you're looking at a picture that's a rough sketch.
In terms of Jake's comment about changing the speech, I think it is a fair point that if we show people a picture of the new bridge, them assuming that that's what the new bridge will look like is not like a crazy position to take. So perhaps a bigger disclaimer, artist rendering,
The phrase that people use is, I've seen the design of the new bridge. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So
So
you haven't seen the new design because I haven't seen it.
a bigger disclaimer on the picture that we're showing them perhaps would be wise.
or just put on there, the bridge won't be this ugly.
Something like that. This is not what it's gonna look like. We show them a picture and they believe the picture, that's reasonable.
All right, so moving on with the financing, the grant applications, our raise grant, we've already submitted to CDS. We talked about the MPDG grants have not been updated. They updated the website and said there was a June 1st update, but they did not put the new NOFO on there yet. So I'm not sure what they did on the website, but when you click the link to the NOFO, it doesn't go anywhere. So I think they're in the process of getting the new NOFO up for the MPDG grants. So it is supposed to come out in June is what we've heard. So as soon as that comes out, we are in the process of getting our stuff rewritten anyway, so that when it comes out, we can get it submitted, as well as getting the BCA updated. So we're working on that. Any other questions related to funding finance tolling? Okay, the only other thing I guess I would note is that the Washington State Transportation Commission will submit their final version of their report this month. So that will officially be over at the end of June. So just everybody's aware of it. We've seen everything. Nothing's really going to change from what we've seen. So, but the final report goes into.
Did it really cost the $1 million+ that they were expecting?
I have not seen I would say they probably spent that. Yes. Yeah.
I have to say that process was far less painful than I thought it was going to be.
So I will say with regards to that, while we all said this is gonna piss a lot of people off when you get a survey that says it's gonna be 8 or 13 or whatever. It made it really good and really positive during the meeting because everybody came in going, oh, it's only 75 cents or $1. I thought it was gonna be $8 and I was coming ready to go to war. And it was like, see, you set expectations really low.
So there will be in the next contract over the next 3 years, they did what was called planning level TNR. The next step is to do an investment grade TNR. We will have a round of that same type of thing where we go out and get public input and all of that. So just be aware that that will be coming back up. But it will be a much more detailed analysis and questionnaires and evaluation, because that will help to set our investment grades and bonding and everything else as we move forward. So just be aware that that's coming back up in the next 3
Like,
years.
are you thinking that's like 6 to 12 months in advance of construction or when?
No, it's got to be before the Tiffy loan. So it will be within the next 2 years that we will start that process and go through that.
And according to Jake's theory, they should include $20 as a it's a total possibility in there, and
Yeah.
people feel really good.
And there will be numbers similar to what you saw in the planning, because
Same
they
methodology.
do have to determine, and if you look at the last report from the Transportation Commission, tolling works kind of like a bell curve, and there is a dollar amount per vehicles that is your maximum peak that you will hit. It's not necessarily the highest number of cars going across, but it's a matter of how many people will pay this X amount of price. That chart shows it at like about $7 before people start actually
Driving to the dock.
doing something else that would actually impact the revenue stream. We're down at the very bottom of that, which is where you want to be, because then when the rating agencies look at it, they look at it as having security and
A lot of capacity.
capacity that you could use if you had to use it for some reason. So it's a good thing, but we're way down on the bottom of that curve, but the top curve is about at $7 before.
But it's
People
also
would
a
actually
bad
make
thing.
life
So it's a
choices.
good thing for the rating agencies, but it's a bad thing when you're asking for money and more money from the state and feds, because they can
Yeah.
see that same thing and they
Right,
can be
that's
like,
right.
well, you actually have this much ability in
Yep.
order to raise funds. And we can send that money that we give you somewhere else.
Yeah, I find the entire process baffling. I'm sure that there's science behind it, but
I'm not
the
sure
fact
about
that you
that,
can ask people the same absurd, you can ask people a variety of absurd questions and deduce some information out of that strikes me as hard to understand.
Isn't that how science works, Arthur?
No, it's not the science that I do.
That's what, I'm not sure I call it science, but it's a process that
We
is
call it
used.
statistics
Maybe.
pseudoscience.
Statistics, yeah,
in marketing.
yeah, okay, there you go. That ends on marketing. Okay.
Well,
Alright.
I'm hoping that you guys keep doing as much public involvement as possible, that the tide starts to turn and people get excited about supporting this new bridge project instead of coming out to complain about it.
Yes, that would be wonderful.
Amen.
You know, I think from the Washington side, what I heard is primarily support.
Okay.
I mean, every time you tell somebody the bridge is, sufficiency rating is 6 out of 100. And they're like, we know, we need a new bridge.
Yeah.
It's like,
I was surprised how many people are scared to drive across that bridge.
It's
There are a
it's
lot of
absolutely true.
people that are legitimately scared.
Yeah, I
to
was
drive.
gonna say, I'm not super
That's why-
brave about it.
Because of the narrow or because of the fall?
All of the above. I mean, it
The
was the
narrowness,
narrowness,
yeah.
the physical condition of it. One thing, sorry, just side point that I would say everybody should keep in the back of their mind. A lot of people didn't realize how they could help in the funding situation of reaching out to their elected officials at more the state and national level. It is on our website, the district, who their representatives are at those levels. Everyone that I said something to about that was very willing to, oh, well, I'll go do that. And a lot of the Washington ones were like, oh, well, my friend lives in Oregon, I'll have them call the Oregon State Legislative and tell them to, get back. I think the more people do that, the more it becomes on everybody's radar that the bridge needs funding. So
I think what we will find is that the Oregon side is a little bit more of a mixed picture. Where there are people who have the luxury of never needing to use the bridge and therefore getting involved in, oh, it's so pretty. I hate to think of it, maybe we can leave it as a bike lane, or you start to get a lot of these discussions that you get from people who don't have to actually make a decision. This doesn't really matter.
Okay.
And so
Do you think most of those people will be coming out to the meeting though?
I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if we get, I would expect to hear that from some people at the meeting. Yeah, I don't know.
Yes.
Majority
And
or-
Arthur, one of the things that I think is really good to point out to those people is, I know Kevin has been going around to our port tenants and talking about how many of their employees are from the Washington side. And so I think that's a really good reminder. They might not be affected by it, but their services might be affected if this bridge was to go away, because Hood River employs a significant number of Washingtonians.
Yeah, this is when I switch into the here's how our local economy works pitch. And usually you can get people there, but people are living in a trust fund, don't care about a lot of things, so that can be
I
hard.
think Arthur raises an important point. The joke I've heard that really tells the tale is this bridge right here is 3 times as long from this side as from the other. People come across it multiple times a day to get to Hood River, but people in Hood River, oh, I'm gonna go to White Salmon next month. I'm gonna batch, like, it's just a different,
Right.
a different perspective. And I think that's a wise heads up.
Yeah, I haven't heard that one either.
Okay, moving on.
All right, moving to the treaty MOAs. As we talked a little bit about Yakima earlier, we are continuing to reach out. We'll hopefully get something going through Marcus. I will be leaving tonight to go to Nez Perce. We have a presentation tomorrow to their council. 2 different things on that. One is to get the use of their logo and support letter. They're supposed to be voting on that tomorrow. And then also furthering the discussions about the MOA. So we have given them the MOA. We'll see what questions they have, and that'll be kind of just moving that forward. I was able to email Umatilla. We're working on a date this month to meet with them for another follow-up meeting. And then Warm Springs, we need to continue to follow up with and get a follow-up meeting hopefully in June with Warm Springs. So.
Did we get any kind of a letter of support for our grants from the Warm Springs?
No, not yet. We have
Okay.
not. No,
Soon.
no.
Was
Nez
that-
Perce has a process where you have to fill out a form and then they have to take it to the tribal council to get approval.
Gotcha.
So that just didn't happen until this June meeting. Warm Springs, we have not received anything yet from them.
For some reason, I was thinking that at the last meeting that I went with Roy and the FHWA, is they were gonna bring it up to their next board meeting, but that never did
Have
come
not
up.
heard back from them yet that anything's happened, but we'll follow up on that one and make sure. Any questions related to the MOAs?
So just remember, the Umatilla has already given us authority to use their,
Yakima and Umatilla, we have their authority to use their logos
Oh, both of them.
and we have their letter of support. You actually reminded me of one other thing. We did have to adjust it. I was gonna get to this down when we talk about the RBMC, which is next. So let me go through this in order. Amendment 4, which is our 3-year work program, we're gonna submit that to the port either late today or first thing in the morning. The go to Arup for their review. If we can get through all of that, then we'll have that on the June 20th meeting for the port. The plan is to establish a 3-year budget, but only allocate the first year. And then each year look at allocations based on how that year is went. And that I think is a really good approach because we're making assumptions of kind of worst case things that could happen. If we get grants is a good example. If we get all our grants this year, there's no grant writing that has to happen for the next 3 years. We're assuming we're not, and we're assuming that there's 3 years worth of grant writing. So, you know, depending on also what kind of contractor and designer we get, that level of effort could be really high, that level of effort could be really low, depending on what we get. So I think doing it on a yearly basis allows us to kind of evaluate those changes as we go. Same thing with funding, that could change the picture substantially depending on where we get funding, the type of funding, how much oversight, what all we have to do with the funding. So we'll submit that over and then we can work through that process with the port, so. We're in the middle of writing the RFP. We're probably about a month out from having a version that will go to the DOTs and the agencies for their first review. And then somewhere around the September timeframe, we're gonna do an industry review of the RFP. One, that'll help us get a pulse on who's interested in the project and kind of what their thoughts are on the process that we're using. So we'll see how that goes. I do have, I think this week, 2 or 3 meetings that have been from contractors and designers that are still checking in and seeing what we're doing and how the project's moving. Kiewitz checked in, Skanska, which is another big contractor, HDR, which is another designer. So a lot of big companies are still watching the project to see where it's going and what's going on. So that's good to see that interest still. We are setting up meetings to continue discussions with FHWA, ODOT, and WashDOT with the Progressive Design Bill, just on how they want to interact with the project, because they are going to own portions of it, and make sure we're set up to know how much involvement they're going to have or how little involvement that they want, and then make sure we're using the right criteria related to their pieces that they're going to own at the end of the day. So we'll continue those coordinations. The geotech investigation, we did have a little bit of a holdup on that. We have all our permits. We're legally permitted to go do the borings. And some final coordination with CRIPPIC and BIA. There was some concerns because as they set their fishing seasons this year, it lined up right on top of when we were doing our borings. So we met with CRIPPIC and talked through that a little bit. They're actually okay on the Oregon side because the water's too shallow to actually net fish. We would still have to kind of make sure we work around the fishermen's, but most of that is during the evening times, actually, when they do most of their fishing. But we have decided to move the start date from June 19th to July 10th to help get to the back end of their season. Depending on the fish runs and how things go, they could end as early as mid-July. If it's a really good season or they don't go as many days, it could run till the end of July. But we think that the timing of that, we can do the Oregon stuff and that process will get us out of their fishing season. And then we can come in and do the Washington stuff between the seasons of the summer run and the silver run that starts in the late summer. So we're trying to work with them to make sure we get that sequenced in between their work. So we may, worst case is we do not go get the Washington side, which is not the end of the world because they actually did 4 borings, I believe, in the channel previously. So we have some data within the channel. It would just be the shallows on the Washington side that we would not be. So it'd be like three borings that we wouldn't get, and we would just have to do those under the PDB contract later. So that's currently the thought right now.
Is there a chance that the Progressive Design Build team might want to go get their own borings?
They will be able to use the majority of our data, but yes, depending on their design and how they want to approach the project, they potentially may have to go get some additional borings. Yes. Yeah. Our thought was it'll minimize it. Typically, these borings were done during NEPA, but we chose to wait on that. So we're really doing some work that would have been NEPA work. It really helps them to inform their proposal and the understand more of their approach going in, so they have an idea. But yeah, I'm sure they will want to go do some additional investigation. On the right of way for that, we do have a whole take on the Washington side. Our appraiser came back and there was one question due to some what was the term that they used? Basically like governing uses for that property and how much of it was actually going to be considered buildable. I told them to go ahead with worst case and assume it was 100% buildable, because the only way to know how much is buildable is to run through a bunch of reports. That's going to take a really long time. So I'm going to have them do kind of bookends and do if it's 100% versus say 50%, and then we can decide whether going and doing those reports and the time constraint that it would take to do that is worth it. But we'll just have to, we'll bring you that information when we have it. We'll
And
see.
do you have an instinct on how much of it you think is buildable, or is there someone who might have that instinct?
I don't know. I'd have to look into that because you'd have to really go out and look at the property and walk it and see what's on the property. It's a pretty small parcel. But it depends on like, is there any cultural stuff on there, wetlands stuff on there?
Right.
Zoning on there that could cause it, yeah, what's the
1.83
topography of it look like? So I think some of that discussion is gonna also be with the owner of, you know, would it be on them to go get all of those reports and justify it? So it gives us a little bit of a negotiating.
We've been able
Position.
to communicate with the owner.
They are aware that we're doing all of this. Yeah, you have to reach out and let them know that you're doing it.
I mean-
So, you know, they're aware of it. They haven't given us any indication of where they are. I
Got the
think.
right address.
Yeah, I think they're probably willing to sell. I don't know where they're gonna be with price and negotiations and things. The new authority does have condemnation rights, both in Oregon and Washington, but we cannot do that until after the NEPA process. So we are a little bit constrained on these processes we're doing right now. They can only be voluntary acquisitions.
Right.
So we will only go to a certain point. If the owners decides they're not willing to voluntarily talk to us, then we will have to stop and wait until we get through the NEPA process. We're also, once that one's done, we'll start looking at the port properties and the impacts to the buildings here and the impacts to the ownership that the port has and figuring out what the process is for that, so. That'll be the two big right of ways, and then we'll also, there's a number of easements that we need to do, temporary and permanent, so. We can also start looking at some of those as we move forward.
Survey works all done.
Almost, it's like 95% done. They thought they were done and then they reached back out to Washington about some questions they had and found out that WashDOT didn't realize they owned some of the stuff they owned or didn't have all the documents, so they got new documents from WashDOT, so they're going through those documents to piece everything together. Once they get that done, then survey should be done.
What about the in lieu site on the Washington side? Does this impact that?
We have, yes, somewhat. The current design, I don't even call it a design, the 5% layout shows potential impacts of piers to a piece of the property,
It's a piece
that's
that's
underwater. We're gonna have the designer look at spreading those out a little bit to miss that area.
Mhm.
But we will have a permanent area easement that we'll have to get from them.
A permanent airway easement, is that what you're saying?
Yes. So we will have
So
to do
The
that.
guys might be fishing under a bridge.
They most likely will be, yes. And
No,
we
not from
will,
land, not from land, only over the water.
correct. Yeah. So it's, we only cross them where they own under the water. We don't cross any of their on land property.
Thank you.
We will have to,
That's not owned by a tribe, that's owned.
it's owned by BIA
By
and Critic,
BIA,
yeah.
yeah.
And there's some land documents that we have to follow related to that. So we're starting some of that conversation too, to see exactly, it's a little gray. It's kind of hard to get somebody to tell you exactly what that process is. So we're gonna start working through that.
When I was working on it, there's a BIA administrator that can unilaterally approve the easement, but he does it under advisement with the four treaty tribes. So you can follow up how that will work.
And
Because
the
in terms of user impact, I mean, you're fishing from the in lieu site. Can be a little different when you're in the shade.
Yeah, I don't think we impact any other real fishing areas.
We're
The piers,
downstream of it.
No, we're
Upstream
we're
of it.
upstream of the
It's
actual
gonna go
fishing
between
site
our
and the
bridge and
dock.
the-
Yeah,
Great, thank
and really on shallow land that I don't think is very good fishing anyways.
Okay.
We will have to accommodate their pier anchors that they use today.
Yeah.
So they tie off on the existing piers today, so that's one of the conversations we've been having with them
Was
is,
that other authorized in the first place?
I don't know the
Or did
answer
they
to
just
that.
start doing it?
Yeah,
It was authorized on the current bridge. We can sell it as a feature of the new bridge.
yeah, I
No,
I don't know if we'd
design
ever
to do it.
get, like, I don't know if we could ever take it away. But what we've been talking to them about is how can what's the best way to accommodate it with the new bridge?
Yep.
And what does that look like?
And there is some good lines through there where that rock pile is. They use that whole section right there. There's some good, but like, it shouldn't impact, with those piers, the boats coming into the.
No, we're way above their dock and
Yeah,
stuff.
so-
Yeah.
The only other element that might come up through the aesthetics committee, or maybe some of the section 106 or treaty agreements. Is perhaps a visual shield on the Washington side. There was some concern in early negotiations that. You're gonna have people walking and bicycling. And there was some concern about being able to see them doing their fishing on that site, and so there was. I don't know if it'll make it all the way through the.
There's also some lighting mitigations of not having light pollution. That we'll have to address when we get through the aesthetics and the lighting of the bridge to make sure we're not affecting the habitat and other things with.
I just think for multiple reasons, this is an important issue for us to be aware.
Right, yeah,
it
it's
is.
just been under discussion, right from the start, and lighting is something where I sure hope we're going to be looking at very focused lighting for all purposes,
Yeah.
not just for fishing.
Yep.
We don't want to be creating light where we don't need it.
Exactly. And then permitting, so like I said, we've got all the permits for the geotech work that needs to happen, and then we're also having conversations with, Coast Guard and Army Corps and the railroad, and just making everybody aware that the project's, starting back up, and that they should expect to hear more from us related to the project, because some of them, it's been years since we've talked to them, because it was early in the NEPA process where they were contacted or engaged in the project. So we want to just make sure everybody's aware that the project's ramping back up. Any questions on any of that? And then the last piece is like we talked about already, the NEPA and the biological opinion. Looks like we're making some progress on the biological opinion. The NEPA is really going to be contingent on getting to Yakima and working through that with Yakima. That's the biggest issue right now, with getting through the NEPA documents and the section 106.
One thing, there was a little conversation this morning about bike ped tolls.
Yes.
And so the EIS document actually states within it that there could be no charge for bike ped in the EIS document.
So you said there's discussion this morning?
Oh, there was, I don't know.
I don't know, you just sent me a text. I wasn't sure where that came from.
Yeah, I think there was some, maybe it came from Jessica.
A bunch of the questions that were written
Yes.
down on the thing were, are you gonna tell Bike Ted? And I said, well, we're not gonna have any live people out there, and you wouldn't make enough money to pay for them if you did. And the last time I checked, I haven't seen a license plate on a bike, so I don't know how we
Yeah.
send them the bill.
The intent is that we're not.
Yeah. You never.
Well, and we're looking at grants, right, that for the multimodal, whatever it's called, and that probably prohibits tolling, doesn't those
totally.
grants typically,
Yeah, they can.
It would be nice to have something definitive so that we don't have to discuss it.
I mean,
Yeah, I just want to jump in and say, absolutely, there has to be a free way to cross a
Yeah.
freeway.
Careful there.
Cross the bridge, yes.
I'll look in I think the NEPA specifically says that we will not charge for it, and I think there's actually won't you have an existing resolution that says that too? For some reason I thought
No,
there
because
was
there
already
wasn't any way to,
toll them anyways.
well, there's no way to walk at the
That's
moment.
okay.
I
There
think
must
there
be
was just,
something in the NEPA documents
think
I've
there were-
read somewhere that says it.
I think there was a question out of that last week about the new bridge authority would determine what the tolls for bike ped would be at the time of opening. Jessica, is that what do you remember seeing that? Or
Can you repeat the question, Kevin? I'm sorry.
yes, so there were all those the summary of comments from the open house last night, and there was the question about bike pedestrian being tolled or not.
Uh-huh.
And one of the comments came back that said it will be free until the new bridge authority makes a determination at bridge opening.
Wow.
I remember
Did
that.
you see that?
I've been letting Anna kind of spearhead the responses to that, but that sounds right.
So that was why I wanted to respond back that the
Yeah.
EIS is saying, no, that's.
And I think that might have come from Anna and not from Jessica. I think it was something
Oh, I'm
that
sorry.
Anna was working on, so Jessica may not have noticed that.
So sorry, guys.
That's okay.
We're
I feel like-
dividing what each of us are focused on right now, as you can imagine. But I'm hearing that we will not be tolling.
almost
Or
no
there
way
won't
to
be,
do
there
it.
won't be a fee, excuse me, for pedestrians or
I
cyclists.
think that maybe the appropriate answer is that the bridge authority is going to get to make a decision, but they may be entirely constrained by contractual
Commitments
arrangements that have already been made or commitments that have already been made or by state or federal law.
Yeah, okay,
But the policy decision, if there is a policy decision to be made, the bridge authority is going to make it. Probably is not a real decision to be made because it's probably already been made.
Yes, I agree.
that's helpful. Thank you.
I think she's on the phone and doesn't realize that she's not muted.
Who's that?
Jessica.
No, she was
She was-
responding to what we were saying, I think.
Oh, okay.
All right, that was all we had for the agenda. Is there any other questions from anyone?
None here.
All right, our next meeting is not before the Port Commission meeting, so we do not have one on the 19th. It is the following Monday on the 25th, because the 19th was a holiday and a number of state and local offices, I think, are closed on the 19th now. So we moved it to the following Monday, so.
So we are receiving what a report, I don't know, don't you have the updated schedule? I think you did, you updated the May 31st schedule for the toll increase. And I think there was a report from JLA that will be coming to, I guess, the Port Commission. So just kind of
Yes.
talking about the process for the toll and how it's going to get implemented.
Or they would just discuss as a possible meeting date.
So there's gonna be a first hearing.
I think that was the date the report was gonna be put out. So,
Right.
yeah, so.
Okay.
Yeah, what Kevin's referring to is that the online open house closes on June 14th. They are going to summarize all of that, send it out to the group on the 16th for any input and a recommendation for the port on the 20th.
That's right. So that'll be the first
So-
hearing
Yes.
for the port on that proposed polling structure. Then the second or the next meeting will be for the port would be July.
I think it's the 9th, because I think right now it's like the 4th, around the 4th, but we're
11th.
over the week.
It's the
11th,
11th.
that's right, it's the day after.
Seven
So
days.
you have a hearing and you may keep that open, or you may keep it open to written but no more oral, and then you'll have a decision in July for implementation.
Correct. So we'll have the first recommendation on tolls, on which toll process by the 20th. Is that correct? So
Yeah.
when will the port be getting a recommendation from the bi-state working group as far as which option A or B?
I think the thought was that we would get you that before the 20th, but because based
How
on
can you do that if we don't have a meeting?
Yeah, I thought you guys were meeting the Friday
I
before.
think that's
Oh.
why he's chiming in. Yeah.
On the 16th,
I
we
don't
were
have
gonna
a
meet.
meeting on
I
the
think we were agreeing, I thought we agreed to do this by email,
Yeah, I thought we were gonna do it by email.
because we said that we don't have a prohibition against doing that.
I thought we were gonna send a report out. What I thought we were gonna do was send a report out on Friday. Everybody was gonna look at it. On 19th, we would send an email recommendation from Jake and Mike to the port for
Okay.
their consideration on the 20th.
Gotcha. And then we would have the hearing, show what the new tolls would be. And then on our meeting in July 11th, there'll be a second hearing, and then the port would adopt the resolution with the new tolls.
It works really well to coincide when I become the president.
A great first activity.
Yes, literally my very first activity.
Sorry.
I'll just add, just for clarity's sake, that we will probably only be able to provide a high level summary of the results prior to the 20th, just because it closes on the 14th and there's the Juneteenth holiday and a weekend in there.
Yeah.
So I hope that that's okay and appropriate. We will have a full comprehensive summary available to everyone following the 20th, but it's gonna need to be like, here's the results and here's the key themes.
The only thing that you were really giving on Friday was the report back out on the two options.
Yeah, okay, perfect.
Not the detailed of like comments to responses or summaries of what we heard. It was
Well,
just,
we already know that every local is gonna pick option.
Yeah,
I mean, unless there is some overwhelming vote Wednesday from Oregon, that's the opposite of what Washington did. It was about 99-1
yeah,
that was option one out of Washington,
sure.
so.
Or out.
at
So
least
so everyone's okay with the numbers,
it's
like the results of option 1 versus option 2?
Yeah,
Okay,
Especially since we have to do 2 readings, like, we'll do the first one. And if there's a massive discrepancy or change, then we can always take a pause and start over.
I will say that I've been seeing on my social ads for the open houses, so good job.
good.
Whoever on this screen is in charge of that it is in fact happening to some people.
yay.
Good.
I like to hear that.
So anyway, so July 11th, that starts the process, and then staff will begin the training and doing the back of the house, the IT stuff, and start implementing all of that. So
Do we have a date certain for the new price?
September 1.
September 1, okay.
And we did, they are JLA, and just make sure I'm right in this, you are making a couple modifications to the boards to have
Yes.
the September 1st date on the boards. That was a big comment we've heard was, when does this go into effect?
Yes, and I don't want to open up a big can of worms, but one of the things I asked Anna to do was to send an email out to some of you to confirm that we feel confident that September 1st is a real date.
I mean, that's the date.
Okay,
That's what we,
And-
all of our
Yeah,
schedules and calendars and everything. are
Okay.
September 1.
unless there's something we can't control that happens. I mean, that's
Sure.
the date, so.
okay. Yes, so the 2 changes to the displays are that will add the September date and that the tolls will be effective in September. And also that we're just going to highlight the row that, like the significant difference between option 1 and option 2, because that's really what we want to draw people's eyes to.
Yeah, so everybody's aware, the trucking is the same for both options. They don't,
And
it's
so
not
is
the only
motorcycles.
difference. It's motorcycles and cars are the only difference.
No, motorcycles are the same.
But that's, I'm sorry, you're right.
Yeah, it's just.
They are, they went up, but they're the same for both.
Yeah.
The only difference is the cars between the two, so they're gonna highlight that.
The
So that's
signage
easier.
comment spurred of memory. Who controls the signboard that's on Highway 14, but like really close to the bridge? Is that us or is that WashDOT? WashDOT. Because the other day I was driving along in my car and it said Hood River Bridge closed, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I just came across that bridge, and that is not true, and that makes us all look stupid. So if we could prevail on WashDOT to not make those kinds of
Yeah,
mistakes,
I
that would
gotta-
be good.
I got a phone call from Mayor Keithler that same morning. So, yeah, it got changed in about 4 hours.
Good, thank you.
So,
But it was close for a bit, wasn't it? Was it close?
there was something, no, it wasn't our bridge. They should have said the Dalles.
That's
Bridge.
right, they
That
put
was
it
for
on the wrong
Dalles.
bridge.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's funny.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it was. They put
That's
they
interesting.
put the sign on the wrong bridge.
On the wrong bridge.
That's right. I remember that.
Sorry.
Nope, not your fault, but
It
good. I'm
wasn't,
glad
but
that
it
we
was-
have a conduit to
Yeah.
fix our local situation.
Okay, do we have anything else for the good of the order? I would be happy to give everyone a little bit back of their time.
Well, I have one just overall comment, like, I know that this bi-state working group is starting to sunset soon. And I just want to thank everyone. I know that over the past couple of years, countless hours have been put in by all of you. And I just really want to recognize how much everyone in all of our communities should appreciate how far we've come in the last couple of years. So kudos.
Thank you, Christine.
We should have a cake.
Ending on that positive note with no cake.
We've got leftover donuts from this morning in the break room.
That would be very appropriate.
All those who would like to adjourn the meeting, say aye.
All right.
Aye.
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 Have a good day, everyone.
Good job.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Great.
So you're